Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 4 of the Spring 2022 Bright Futures Career Speaker Series. The Bright Futures Career Speaker Series is an educational webinar series sponsored by the Napa County Office of Education, Marin County Office of Education, Napa Valley College, College of Marin, and the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay. Today's presentation topics will cover careers in technology. As people are logging on today, I'm going to do a quick round of introductions. My name is Sita Williams, and I work for the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay. Moderating our program today is Angela Higdon with the Napa County Office of Education. Presenting today, and if you could raise your hand, presenters, when I say your name, is Carrie Leschek from Adobe Digital Imaging, Rebecca Anderson from Napa County Office of Education, Matt Dombrowski from the University of Central Florida, and Jonathan Richardson from G2D Design. Before we get started with today's speakers, I'm going to do some quick housekeeping so that we're all on the same page throughout the webinar. We will be recording the webinar. So why offer a career speaker series? Well, first, we'd like to introduce you to some of our local and national professional experts. We'd like to introduce you to jobs that you may not have known about before, and we'd like to help you to make informed decisions about the next steps on your career path, whether you're a student or a job seeker. What to expect today? The presentation hour will include an introduction, like we're doing right now, a speaker panel discussion time, and question and answer time. Please use the chat function of the webinar to ask your questions. We will be sure to repeat the questions out loud to the speakers. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to you, Angela.
All right, good afternoon. Thanks everybody for being here. So I'd like to start, if we can, just with a round of introductions from each of our panelists. So I'll call on you individually. If you could just give us some information about who you are, what you do, and who you work for, that would be great. And then we'll dive right into the questions. So Rebecca, can I start with you?
Oh, sure. Rebecca Anderson, and I am the Director of Technology Training and Support Services at the Napa County Office of Education. And I have a team of 7 people, and we are responsible for the provision of desktop support. We manage our digital early learning program. We do a lot of training with people on how to use the technology, so we don't just kind of give it to them and hope for the best. We manage the website, basically anything tech related, we have our hands on it. In addition to that, I also have some side gigs going on. I do e-learning development for Virginia Commonwealth University as a side gig, and then website work, and we have a website, happyhournapa.com, that we're working on as well. So professional position, the day job is the Napa County Office of Education, and then I guess I like to stay busy by my little side gigs.
All right, thanks so much, Rebecca. Matt Dombrowski, how about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Matt Dombrowski. I am an associate professor at the School of Visual Arts and Design in Orlando, Florida at the University of Central Florida. I have the very cool job of also being creative director for a nonprofit called Limitless Solutions, and we make art-infused bionic arms for children with limb difference and other accessible creative technology to help underserved individuals, and we give everything away for free.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. Carrie.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Carrie Leschek, and like they said, I work for Adobe. For those of you that might not know, Adobe is a company that makes lots of different software, much of it apps related to creativity. You guys might have seen Adobe on your computers on things like your Adobe Acrobat PDF reader. You might have also heard of apps like Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Spark, and we're behind those as well. But for my role at Adobe, I'm a user researcher on the Photoshop team. And so my role is to get feedback from people who use Photoshop through interviews and surveys, and tell the Photoshop team how we can make the app better. And I also do research on people who don't use Photoshop yet to try to figure out, who might want to use it in the future. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Jonathan. Oh, you're muted, Jonathan.
Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Richardson, the owner of G2D Design, and I actually happen to use Adobe products. I just used some a few minutes ago, and we'll use some when we conclude this meeting. I am a branding and design company. We specialize in silkscreen printing, print materials, collaterals, promotional products. So everything design related, powered by Adobe. There's your plug, Adobe. Make sure you guys hashtag me, tag me in that. And we basically service any business, any company. We have clients, Travis Credit Union, different companies that we work with. We work with small, mid-sized, large corporations, school districts across the state and the country. And again, we help them with developing collateral, content, media, anything that's necessary to help them to get the message out. So that's G2D in a wrap.
All right. So Jonathan, since you're unmuted, we'll start and send the first question your way. When did you decide that you wanted to work in your field, and how long have you been doing that?
So that's long, but I'll give you the short edition. The cliff.
Okay.
So it was in the early 1990s. I was selected to attend a middle school that was basically a pilot program specializing in science and technology in Waco, Texas. It was there that I was exposed to back then what was called print shop. And print shop, you know, it was like dot matrix printer, this loud printer, and making banners and tearing off the edges. And you really thought you were doing something great. But if you go back and look at that today, you're like, that was the most terrible thing invented. But we made flyers and posters and all kind of things out of paper that was interconnected and perforated. So good thing we don't use that anymore. We can just print on the size paper that we choose. But it was at that school where that district invested in a Mac lab back then. So the early version of Mac. And we were exposed to developing business plans and virtual companies and different things of that nature. And it was there that I was exposed to design. And I started doing things for my church, and then I started doing things for friends in the community. Fast forward, I ended up going through middle school, high school, joined the Air Force. And it was when I landed in Germany and bought my first computer that I was exposed to Photoshop Elements. There's again another plug for Adobe. So I played around with it, and eventually people started seeing what I was creating and started wanting to pay me for it. So then I was like, so you want to pay me to do what I just did for myself for free for you? Okay, cool. A couple of years later, I come back stateside, and on January 1st, 2003, while being displaced and renting a room from someone while trying to get my life together, I decided to launch G2D Design. So we're on year 19 now, coming up on the 20-year anniversary of a creative marketing branding company. And that's what inspired me, was the fact that I could manifest an idea, create something tangible, and now have a person that wants to purchase that. That was the motivation for getting into it, and knowing that you made someone's day, or you helped to advance someone's company, or you helped to create excitement for an event because of the look and feel of something that was created that went from just an idea to an actual physical manifestation.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Rebecca, same question. When did you decide that you wanted to work in technology, and how long have you been doing that work?
I have some similarities to Jonathan a bit in that, whoa, you guys want to pay me to do this? Okay. It happened back in like 1997, 1998. I was actually working for the Hilton as like a admin assistant. And I was like, I gotta quit this job because I want to work in what I had gone to college for, which was education. Adult education. And so I quit the job, took this new one at an organization that was focused on delivering professional development in all kinds of different fields. And it was an entry-level admin assistant position. And in short, like a lot of people just ended up coming to me like, I can't print. You know what, my mouse isn't working. I just kind of ended up being the go-to person. And then at one point they were like, we need to have a website. And they were, you know, looking at all these different options and figuring out how much it was going to cost. And I was like, I just did a little workshop training. I can make a website. And I just put it out there that I could do that and felt confident I could do it. And from that point forward was basically the jumping off point for me being sort of like the go-to person for things tech related. You know, related to that also, like then we kind of started like this whole e-learning stuff, and that I was a significant or played a significant role in just because of the web experience. So you know, it definitely was evolution. It definitely felt like a thing that happened to me, but it was something that I liked and felt lucky that I got to continue to do and grow in that role and turn it into other things.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. Carrie, same question. What about you?
Sure. So about 7 years ago, I went to graduate school to get my PhD in social psychology in a neuroscience lab. And when I went to graduate school, I really thought that I wanted to be a professor at a university and teach and, you know, run my own research lab and write papers. But near the end of grad school, I realized that those things were not really the parts of grad school that I enjoyed. And that's what the day-to-day of running your own lab and being a professor was like. And so I started to seek out other ways that I could do research, but not in an academic setting. And so I started looking at industry positions. And I ended up starting at a healthcare IT company about in my last year of grad school, just as an intern doing product research. I really felt like it was a better fit for me. I was really able to keep a better work-life balance than I had been able to in academia. It just wasn't something that I felt I could do in that kind of setting. And so I started in that research role and then actually transitioned to more of a product manager role at that same company. And then right before I graduated, I actually transitioned to Adobe in that user research role, which sort of shifted back to more hands-on research, developing surveys, the things that I really like to do in grad school. So I really decided to work in technology so that I could do the day-to-day things that I really loved, you know, when I got training for research. And so I was at the healthcare IT company for about a year and have been at Adobe for about a year now. So only 2 years total so far for me.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. Matt?
Yeah, so I'm going to actually build off of what Carrie said, because I am a researcher and I do run a lab, but I totally agree with what Carrie said. So I've been doing this for about 22 years now, and I started as a freelance graphic designer, motion graphics artist using Adobe After Effects and Autodesk Maya, creating 3D animation for TV commercials for all the places down here in Orlando that you can probably imagine, the big name theme parks and things like that. It was something that I liked, but there is definitely, and I'm sure Jonathan can relate to this one, there is definitely a certain clientele that you deal with and a certain day-to-day rigor and day to night, today to night sometimes, that, you know, it just wasn't for me. And it's not to say that was bad, it just wasn't for me. And so I went to grad school, I fell in love with teaching, and I said, well, why don't I be a professor? And just like Carrie said, I started doing academic research and I was like, wow, this can get kind of boring and it's kind of limited. And I was at kind of a crossroads in 2015, and this new group of just newly graduated students of engineers had just designed a 3D printed Iron Man arm prosthetic for a little boy named Alex. And if you ever YouTube Iron Man prosthetic arm, you'll find a really amazing video for that. And Robert Downey Jr. gave an arm away to a little boy, and it was themed like Iron Man. And these guys just showed up one day across the table from me and they said, hey, we're engineers, we need help. And so we had a long conversation and I talked about what I did, and we talked about making cool, artful arms because most bionics are doll-like and plastic-like, and why not make them look amazing and empowering? And I made a comment about, well, why don't we make a video game to teach the kids how to use their arms? And the way the arms work is you flex your muscle, the muscle is red, and the arm can open and close, so kind of like a garage door opener would open and close. But they use their muscle strength for that. And so they said, absolutely, let's do it. And I remember a year later, we presented that video game to a little boy named Zachary, who's just actually here in Orlando last week. And this sounds sappy, but his face lit up. And I remember thinking, holy mackerel, something I created, a creative product, just changed this person. And this was, it's hard to describe, but I remember leaving that event in tears thinking, I got to keep doing this. I got to keep doing this. It became addictive, and it became a kind of building off of what Carrie said. It became my mission to rethink how research is run in an academic setting. I do write papers and we do all that other stuff, but why not use all our talents to make the world a better place? And right now we have a 6,000 square foot lab with tons of amazing sponsors, including Adobe. Again, we're going to keep shouting you out. And we just keep creating these bionic arms. And we have 35 undergraduate students from all different disciplines in the university, all of which are creative, but not necessarily artists. They all use technology, and they come together to have that same moment kind of that I did that changed my career path. So again, a bit of a sappy answer, but I wouldn't trade it in for the world. And I'm really glad that I could kind of fuse all those different industries that I had kind of a toe in to get where I am today.
All right, so you might have just answered the next question, Matt, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway to you to see if you'd want to add anything. It almost seems pointless to ask, but what motivates you to go to work every day? What motivates you to continue to do this work day after day?
My students, first and foremost. Like I see them every day. I see their passion. I was in their shoes years ago. And the kids that we serve, and the bionic kids, the kids that we deliver arms to, the little boy that had that moment for the video game actually decided to write a comic book to raise more money for another child to get a bionic arm, asked us to illustrate it. We of course said yes. We created a comic book for him, and he just raised $13,000 to get another child a limb. So that like pay it forward moment, it's amazing. It's real. And so, yeah, that motivates me every single day to come in, to innovate, and just, helping one person at a time can make a huge impact on our world today. And we need that. We need some more positivity in this world.
Absolutely. Jonathan, what about you? What keeps you going every day?
The best way for me to describe this, and he just mentioned, in the prior two questions combined, there's a weight in this particular industry of creativity that sometimes you can't really put a finger on, but it's a weight of responsibility. And I had a friend who said to me one day, and it made a lot of sense. And this is what she said. She said, creative people are the closest thing to God. And I asked her, I said, why do you say that? And she said, because you have the ability to think a thing and manifest it. And most other people don't have that burden of, this idea is in my head. I can only see it. No one else can see it. I can describe it with words, but until it actually is manifested onto a sheet of paper or into a product, it doesn't exist except for within my own reality. And, it's like when she said that, it was like, wow, when you wonder your value and your worth and what is it that you're contributing, the fact that someone can walk in with a piece of paper with a sketch that is not even fully manifested and you take that and create something, and they come in and either they're in tears, or they come in and they're like, wow, this is a game changer. Or 10 years later, you see a logo or a brand that you created, and it's like, oh, that's on the billboard now. Oh, wow. Those are the things that motivate you, because now you realize your reach has so many tentacles that you're impacting people in ways that you would have never imagined. And that's one of the things that is like the gas station fuel up for a creative person, is knowing that you are able to literally manifest a thing that has catapulted other people forward before it catapulted you forward.
Okay. Rebecca, same question.
I think sometimes I have to remind myself, what is motivating me to go to work every day. Most of the time it's very obvious, but we all have hard days, that's for sure. But for us, when you're doing things like tech support, or you're updating a website, or showing somebody how to use a tool, whether it's PowerPoint or some video editing software, it can seem a bit mundane at times, but the reality is the work that we do impacts kids, because we're working directly with teachers and staff. Even the e-learning work that I do for Virginia, that's the trainings that I've helped put together are impacting 10,000 early childhood educators they're going through that, and they're using those skills to be able to help kids. So it's actually something we talk about in our staff meetings sometimes, like it's hard right now, it's frustrating, this is the problem, but in the end, like, this is what we get to do, is essentially help people, even though it's indirectly. So we try and keep our focus on that.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Carrie?
Yeah, I really like to solve problems and puzzles and to answer questions. And, I was probably that annoying kid who followed up every single question with, but why? Well, the sky's blue, but why? Over and over again. And so those things like problem solving and puzzles are the things that I really liked about, academics and doing research in that field. And so now, I love finding clever ways to design research studies that can answer the questions that people have, whether it's about products or about, the healthcare IT field. And so in my job, when I'm doing research, you always start with a question or a problem, and I get to investigate and collect data. And then, I make recommendations based on that data that I collect to come up with a solution that our, design and engineering teams can actually implement. And then we actually make changes to the products that we are putting out to people. And so I can see the impact of the research that I'm doing in those products when those changes happen. And even when I was at the prior role in the healthcare IT company, that company was responsible for making the computer software that doctors and nurses use in hospitals to record patient data. And so there I was, asking a lot of the same questions, how can we make the software easier to use? And ultimately in that field, it was really about making it easier to use for doctors. And ultimately that was, reducing the number of errors in patient charts and medication prescribing and, really tangible problems that we were trying to solve. And I'm still answering a lot of the same questions at Adobe. It's just outside of healthcare now. And it's, related to making these apps easier to use and more fun and more enjoyable. And I guess the other thing outside of sort of the problem solving and investigative nature of the job that I have, I think I'm really motivated by the people that I work with in my job. So my immediate team consists of other researchers like myself, and I'm often collaborating with them to determine, how to design or collect data. But I'm also working directly with people in other fields, like our engineers, our software developers, our designers, to try to figure out what questions they have, to align on how we're going to collect that data, and to work with people that are really excited and engaged about the questions that you're trying to answer makes that problem solving a lot more fun.
Okay, Carrie, we're going to stay with you. And I'm going to actually take this to the chat box that we just had a question come in. Would you say that would you all say that jobs in the technology field are always going to be sitting in front of electronic screens?
That's a good question, because I think, in pandemic times, things have certainly changed and shifted to that direction. But, as we come out of that, I would certainly say no. And I don't think that is how it's going to be in the future. From my role as like a researcher, I can tell you that, pre-pandemic and as we come out of this, we are often going out in the field to do some of this research, talking to people face to face, in the settings that they're actually using these tools in, whether it be in a hospital to collect that, that feedback from a doctor, or, shadowing someone while they're actually, designing something in Photoshop and watching them use it. And so while we've adapted to, the situation that we find ourselves in with the pandemic and being remote and behind these electronic screens, I don't think that's, a persistent feature of these technology fields. It doesn't have to be.
Okay. Jonathan, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I mean, when I look at my role as a designer, there's moments of pen, paper, and pencil. And I'm not even an artist to that degree of drawing, but that is the initial origin of creative design is, let me at least get this rough idea out of my head. This is going to be real ugly, but I need to get it out so that now I can mold it. And I think, when people realize, you talk about technology, or we're going to be in front of these screens. I mean, the end product is, yes, you'll probably use a lot of time in front of some form of technology, but technology is not 100% of the job in technology. As our Adobe representative so eloquently presents, there's a component of research. There's a component of, I almost want to say, meditation. Let me think what someone else is thinking about this. Or let me design a piece. Let me just throw this mud, if I could use that vernacular. Let me throw this mud on the wall. Let me go get some food, and let me come back and look at the mud on the wall and determine if I like what it looks like, or if it gives me a new meaning. So there's the intangibles that are tied to technology that ultimately, without the human component, the technology has no meaning. It has no purpose. It has no value.
Okay, thank you. And Matt, I saw you immediately shake your head. What would you like to add to that?
I think Jonathan's and everyone's spot on. I mean, even Rebecca, you mentioned this in your last answer about it's the products that we make affect people, and in your case, my case, children. And it's something that, without the why in it, there's a great TED talk by Simon Sinek about, finding the why. And without finding our why, it's just buttons. And, something Adobe's done very well is they find the why behind the buttons, and who uses them and why they use them and what stories they have to tell. And so on the surface, sure, there's screens, but like everyone said just here, it really comes down to the humans that are behind the technology and what they bring to the table.
Okay, and finally, Rebecca, same question.
A lot of times people will, they'll put in a ticket, or they'll come by and they'll ask if they can use X tool, whatever it is. Technically it's almost always going to be yes, unless there's some major issue with it. But, it's really important that we spend time talking with the person and figuring out what it is they want to accomplish, and, what are their ultimate goals. Because is the tool they want really the right tool? So, we engage in a lot of conversation. So, certainly there is a lot of time in front of a screen, that's where we go to research things, but we also spend a lot of time as a team talking with one another. And if our communication skills with each other and the people we serve is not on point, that's where we start to see breakdowns and failure. So for me, having, staff with excellent communication skills, and making sure that's a priority, and that we're not just all in complete isolation behind our screen, is super important.
Okay. Rebecca, we'll stay with you. And actually, you kind of jumped ahead on this one too. But
Uh-oh.
what are the key personality traits or skills for somebody that wants to be successful in your career?
So communication, I may have mentioned that. And to be honest, like that's a big deal. I mean, anytime where I start to see failures or people are frustrated, it's because things haven't been communicated to them. So most times anyway. So that's a place where we try and focus and what I'm really looking for. But also I think in general, I think for any of the jobs in tech, you have to have a willingness to be persistent and be okay with failing and trying again, going back and rereading, trying it again. Persistence is really, really important as well. You could go through and read the instructions step by step and do it, and then, it doesn't work. So then you're looking again at what your possible options might be. And so you're just trying different variations. So being okay with failure and trying again, super important.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, same question. What are the key personality traits or skills required?
Ooh. Patience is one. There's a lot of times as a designer where a client comes in with an idea that is terrible. They come in and they believe that they have solved the world's greatest answer or challenge with an idea. And when you see what they're presenting you, the messaging is way off. And they are determined, this is it. This was my grandmother's middle name, and it has to be a part of this because without it, I'm not going to climb this ladder. And it's like you're trying to be sensitive to the customer because they have found value in what they've worked on, and having patience to let them get all of that out and find a unique way through communication to basically guide them in a different direction. That is a skill that has to be mastered. And the unique nature of it is that every person you meet has a different perspective and personality that you have to adjust to. There is no like, oh, this is our policy and procedure. We're just going to check these boxes and the customer is going to be happy. No, not true. So having patience. But the other piece is, and you and I had a conversation offline after one of our last sessions, and I think that this is a fitting place to say this quote, that I do not know who the author or writer is, but I actually learned this on a webinar about 14, 15 years ago. A person in this webinar made a statement, and they said that the gift of hand does not substitute for the absence of heart. And if you think that you can design this phenomenal mural, but yet be absent of heart, what the mural should have become, it will never be, because you didn't give it the entirety of who you are or the creative bandwidth that is possible. So I think that those are two things, is recognizing the amount of patience and then even just listening. Sometimes people are telling you something, but don't realize they're saying something different until you show them, this is what you're saying, but you're telling me something different. And then just guiding. So you're basically helping a person navigate through a process, and you have to have extreme patience.
All right, great. Matt, what about you? What do you see as the key skills?
Yeah, I think those 21st century skills that everyone are saying, when we think technology, immediately we go again to the buttons and things like that. But it comes down to what everyone said here just before me. It comes down to being able to communicate, having that patience, listening. All of those skills are so important. Be able to fail forward and understand that, especially with even coding language, I see in the chat there, you're going to make more mistakes than you're going to make successes when it comes to coding. And so just kind of learning and to deal with that and being vulnerable and understanding that as a creative, it's okay to work on those 21st century skills just as much as you work on the technology behind them. And yeah, that's I think everyone said it so well. I can't add too much to it, but good job.
All right, thank you. Carrie?
Yeah, Jonathan, you said something that really resonated with me. You mentioned having to adapt to your clients or the people around you when you're working. And I want to extend that a little bit. In my relatively short time in the industry so far, I've observed time and time again that one of the biggest assets is the ability to pivot or be flexible and to adapt. So, technology broadly is this really fast moving field these days. And, in my job, my team's immediate priorities or needs or interests change very frequently, sometimes without any notice at all. And you get an executive who all of a sudden is really interested in this one particular feature or workflow, and all of a sudden on Tuesday, you're scrapping all the plans you drew out on Monday, for the rest of the week or weeks. And you have to be ready to shift and adapt to those changes as they happen in real time. And because of the fast pace of the field these days, that means you also can't get too attached to one way of doing things. And so you have to be flexible, willing to adopt, whether that's, a new solution, a new way of thinking, and you can always learn new skills. So I'm a hard believer that, those like soft skills that are a bit harder to develop are far more important to develop early rather than something like coding. Although, coding has made my life easier and more efficient, but it is not near important in the day-to-day of working with people and getting things done as those other skills.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. And I'm going to come back to the question in the chat in just a minute, but I want to ask another one that kind of relates to what we just talked about. And I hear this a lot in some of the conversations that we've had today, the word team. So how important is collaboration in what you do? And Carrie, we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I think I mentioned before, I collaborate on every project that I have with designers, with engineers, with people from sort of every piece of the team that goes into the product. So it's certainly a part of my everyday role. I don't conduct or plan research in isolation. So in addition to working with other researchers who help me sort of nail out plans and logistics, I'm working with the product managers to decide what questions we actually want to answer. And I'm working with, designers to give me I give them specs of here's what I need to test. Here's the prototype. Here's what it has to have and how, the user experience has to be. And I'm working with the engineering team to say, here's what we decided to implement, when can we get it in the product? And here's what the data says and why we need to implement it this way. So every project that I work on is, collaborative in nature. And we also have to make sure that the, higher level executives who are not involved in that day to day, but still very much invested in the research and the outcomes of the product, we have to make sure that they too are aligned with what we're doing, that they will believe what we tell them when we come back with the data, so that it's not all for nothing and can actually lead to something actionable and actual change. So 100% collaboration is a part of every day for me.
Okay, Matt?
Yeah, collaboration for us at Limitless is really important. I'm not an engineer. I work with some brilliant aerospace and mechanical engineers that do things that even in my dreams, I probably wouldn't be able to do. And it's really important because there's so many people out there, especially with those who do 3D printing, and things are becoming more and more accessible. But something we've strived to do is always involve the subject matter experts. So for us, we're not just 3D printing arms and saying, here you go, kid, enjoy. We have to involve the doctors, the occupational and physical therapists. We have to think about the impact that these products have in the long-term kind of scope of things. And so one thing that, especially with our student intern population, is we always strive to bring in people who think differently, come from different backgrounds, if you're in the room with your whole team and they all think exactly like you're probably not in the right space. So you definitely want to have people who challenge you, who have different perspectives, different voices, different backgrounds, different cultures, ethnicities, everything be in the world that you can bring together as possible. And, then you're all going for that common why, right? So for us, it's those bionic kids. So even though we may disagree at times, or we may decide to, kind of compromise on certain design things from a technical versus a creative standpoint, we are all doing it for the right reasons. So for me, those are teamwork and collaboration is so valuable for what we do. And, without it, it would be one note rather than that symphony, so to speak.
Okay, Jonathan?
The team component for a creative person, I could sum it up in this way. You can't do it all. You could try, and trust me, I have my share of trying to do a whole lot. And what you learn from the attempts at being siloed is that you end up more fatigued, more demotivated, more procrastination, because the weight of what is coming is more than what you can bear. And if you're going to be successful, you have to be very open. The way that I even do some small business coaching, because oddly to say, there's businesses that I have no interest in doing that come to me to just say, how do I get started? Because they're like, well, you've been doing this so long. Obviously you have a formula. I was like, no, I don't have a formula. I just have a mindset that helps me to recognize that I have a bandwidth that I can handle. And after that, that means that I need to find a team member, outsource something. I need to recognize that. And here's a wonderful example. If I have a customer that decides to order 400 shirts, and that shirt needs printing in like 3 different locations, and I'm going to do that by myself, that means I have to load the shirt, print the shirt, offload the shirt, fold the shirt, and box the shirt, and ship the shirt. That's for all 400 pieces. Now, if I have 5 people helping me with that 400 piece order, we'll probably complete that whole order, if not the same day, within a day and a half, give or take. And even the amount that I need to pay them from payroll is far more important than the amount of time and energy that I would lose trying to do it alone. And then now, over time, I drag myself down this road of being worn down to where now the thing that brought me the most joy is no longer something that fuels my passion. So it's having a team and trusting them. And I'll say this just as an insert. Your vision as whether it's a business owner or whether it's in your career, is what you're doing is a baby that you've birthed. And at a certain point, all of us went to somebody's daycare. We were outsourced to be watched, and we were outsourced to be nourished. We were outsourced to be cared for. And we have to look at our careers, our businesses, and our pursuits in the same way. At a certain point, we have to realize we can't do it all and help what the vision is to be successful.
Great. Thank you so much. Rebecca.
I'm going to build on Jonathan. So going a step further, so just, we can't do it all. We also can't know it all, especially in tech, when we have so many different directions of work that we are involved with at NCOE. Like, I can't be the Windows desktop expert or the Mac desktop expert, the web expert, the digital early learning program expert. I can't be an expert in all of those things. And I depend upon my team. And that's also something that I try and talk about at least once a year during our staff meeting. It's just a reminder, like, I don't need my team to be acting as a yes man. Like, do you have a better idea on how to do something? I want to know it. Am I putting something out there that's wrong? Like, speak up, let me know, let's make a change. also, really trying to pull upon the expertise of my staff and like who could take this on instead of me necessarily being the one to do it. So, and you have to be okay with it took a while. I think that was definitely evolution of a leader, like being okay with not being the one to do it all, and also being okay with not knowing it all and understanding why that is.
And that can certainly be a tough one for any leader. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Rebecca, I'm going to stay with you, and we're going to go to the chat. And so the question some of you saw it, were, do you suggest that learning a coding language is useful in your field?
For me, it is. I'm not a programmer. I'll just put that out there. And I think there's a difference between a web designer and a programmer. So for me, I do a lot with HTML and CSS, and those have been skills that I've been able to use when I'm trying to manipulate other tools and get them to work the way I want them to work, mostly from a design perspective. Some of my side work, I wish that I knew more about PHP and SQL as that relates to some of the e-learning and web design work that I do. So I think that question really depends upon the direction you want to go. I mean, same thing with my other side thing, like, we built a website instead of an app because that's where our expertise was. But if you want to be an app designer, that's a specific language you want to, follow that path down. Go down that path. So I think it depends on what you want to do.
Okay, thank you. Carrie, same question.
Before I went to grad school, I had never coded anything in my whole life. And once I got there, I quickly learned that, learning something like a little bit of bash scripting and some MATLAB went a long way. And what that did for me was just let me to expedite a lot of the analyses that I would have otherwise, done by point and click manually, doing. And so being able to automate those point and click actions and, let a looped analysis like run overnight or while I go to dinner bought me a lot of time that I otherwise wouldn't have had. And so, I enjoyed doing that scripting. Not everybody does, but it's not a requirement of my job now. I could do my job 100% without coding right now, but it does give me certain things that I think are valuable for sort of my everyday role, even though it's not required. So, for me, I'm generally automating like statistical analyses that I'm running on data sets and things. And so, like I mentioned, first and foremost, it buys me a little time to let things run more efficiently. But secondarily, something else that's really important to me is being able to document what I've done and being able to have that script saved and able to, repeat that a million times if I need to, or change something and have a complete record of what I've done is also really important to me. And so it also bought me that. But I will say I, have learned these coding languages for, statistical analyses when I've needed them as a project demands it, or would be, it would benefit me to learn it in a particular tangible project. That is when I've learned them. And that is when I've learned them best. And so I think, I learn new skills and new coding languages best out of necessity. And I wouldn't say you should go learn these just for the sake of learning them. I think if it is, like Rebecca said, specific to whatever field you're going into, or would be, that's going to be a tangible skill on the job market, that's a little bit different, but just, you want to pick the language that's going to be relevant for you and actually provide value to you in your work.
All right. Jonathan, same question.
There's no coding. In my field, coding's not necessarily required, but if you're looking, again, I think Carrie said it best. If you have that skill set and you've mastered it, it could enhance something that you need to do that may be a process. It's interesting. I'll use this example. It's not a coding example, but just saying, I can run an Excel document into the ground and I use it for data purposes. So if I'm trying to update, hey, I'm increasing all these prices, by 5%. Well, I have them already in with formulas. All I need to do is now, oh, I'm increasing 5% next quarter. It tells me what my projections is across all items, like within a moment. Now, that took me a minute to build, but moving forward, it now saved me. If I had to recalculate every single thing, I would never get any other work done, which means I'm not sure how I'm gonna pay the PG&E. I don't know how I'm gonna pay the lease for the building. I don't know how to pay for the vehicle, and I'm not sure I'm gonna pay your payroll because I spent all my time not developing projects, not building new business opportunities or relationships. I spent it working on data all the time. So there's sometimes moments when I take a retreat to go deal with data. And people are like, where are you going on vacation? I wish it was a vacation. It's a moment for me to get away from all of this long enough to focus on a thing that's going to make my day tomorrow better. So I've dealt with CSS and different HTML components of web development. I decided once Dreamweaver turned into Demon Weaver and it turned into a whole nother beast. I said, oh, that's a service I am no longer going to provide, because if I'm not willing to learn every language of the world, I am not ready to learn this language that keeps changing. So you learn what is going to be helpful, but learning something that you don't need means that you just took up bandwidth for something that could have been for something more purposeful.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Matt.
Yeah, I think what everyone says is spot on. I think for any job in any career, and I tell my students this all the time, you want to kind of understand first and foremost what your specialty, what your niche, what you're being brought on board to do. That's the first thing. You need to know, this by research, by going and talking to people like us or going on LinkedIn or wherever it may be, talking to people who are doing the job you want to do and saying, hey, what is your day-to-day? Because what you'll find is most people do a very narrowed kind of thing. And then it's really important to kind of expand. It's like a bubble, but expand that bubble and go, okay, I'm doing this thing, but who am I directly giving this thing to, or who's giving that thing to me, and what do they do? You don't have to be an expert at that person's craft, but you do need to understand what that is. So in my case, this happened the other day in our lab, and it kind of made me chuckle because I have a brilliant computer scientist student who's coding our video game, and he had trouble with some graphic thing inside of our game engine. And I went into the code. I know nothing about code, and I just happened to hit the right button, I think. So, I let him know over and over that I fixed the thing. But I did know enough to know where to open it, where to look and process it and go, this looks out of place. And by no means am I a coder, a programmer, anywhere in between. And I think that's valuable. And it also gives you a perspective on, am I rushing this person? Am I giving them enough time? Did they give them too much time? It gives you a valuable kind of day-to-day kind of idea of how the whole system works. You're a cog in that machine, but what are the other cogs doing? And how can you make their job more efficient? So in turn, your job is more efficient in return.
Right. Thanks, Matt. So I think we have time for, gosh, it's almost done. One more question. So Matt, I'm going to stay with you. What do you think is the best thing about doing what you do, and what is the most challenging?
Sure. It's a very similar answer with just a slight tweak. For me, the best thing in the world is being able to give a kid a prosthetic arm for free, where they typically cost hundreds of thousands to, very expensive for the families, but to give them something that's affordable and cost efficient, and that they don't have to worry about money whatsoever for. On the other end of that, it's not being able to give every kid that. And that's the hard part. We get emails every day that ask, for instance, even the conflict in the Ukraine right now is happening. And there are a lot of regulations on especially medical devices going from the US to overseas that currently it's almost impossible to navigate that. And so seeing those stories and wanting and knowing we can make that thing, like Jonathan said, we can make this thing a reality. And it's no pun intended, it sounds like one, but at arm reach away, that we can help someone, and we have to wait, and we have to do it the long way, and we have to make sure the FDA approves, which in turn will help more kids in the long run. I think that's the hardest part of my job. Trying to stay on that train track and going, but if I just go a little bit this way, maybe no one will see me hand out, this device. We can't do that. We have to keep it on the up and up. And so it's really the same answer. It's helping people, and then the people who we can't help, knowing that they're still out there, and we got it. That makes us work harder. So in turn, it actually turns into a good thing in the long run.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Carrie, what about you?
I am not a particularly creative person myself in my personal life, but as part of my job, I get to talk to a lot of the people who are using products like Photoshop. And so those are, digital artists, graphic designers, and photographers, and kind of everywhere in between. And for me, it feels really enriching and interesting to talk to them and understand more about, their creative process, what it means to them, and sort of, creativity and arts in that way for me are, very mysterious, because I don't feel I can create those things myself. And so by talking to those folks, I really feel like I get to sort of get an inside peek and look under the hood of how they think about their creativity, how it really is like this huge part of their life and their everyday. And so for me to learn more about that and to understand more about that is really, I think, enriching for my everyday life, and to understand, that segment that has not been as central to my own identity in the past. And the most challenging thing, I think, as probably many students would understand, I said that collaboration is a big part of what I do, and group projects can be really tough. So it can be tough to get everyone on the same page with the goals and how you're going to approach a project. People in different roles with different interests have, they want to answer different questions, and they think you should go about it different ways. And so it can be really challenging to balance all of that out in order to end up with a project that feels like you came away with something relevant and useful to everyone involved. But as I think I mentioned before, that buy-in from everybody, getting everyone on the same page is absolutely critical to, making sure that work that you do does have a bigger impact in the long run.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, what is the best thing about doing what you do? What's the most challenging?
I'm gonna show you something. So literally moments before our call started, a customer came to pick up an order. I'd never met this person before, but they were referred to me because my company information was on the bottom of a memorial program in the Oakland area. And her father passed away, and they needed these programs for the service, which is on Friday this week. So as if anybody knows, someone goes through this process, all of a sudden the creative person is being dumped on all this information. And now you have this heavy task of helping the family feel like something was well. And so I'm just going to show, this is the cover of a memorial tribute, compliments of Adobe. There you go. Shout out to Adobe. But the most valuable part of that is when I'm looking at the fact that she came in stressed because here her father has passed away, and she's wanting to make sure that this service in 2 days goes well and that no one complains about anything, that I was able to take the time to utilize the tools that I have, but also the humanity of saying, what would I want in the position that this customer is in, that she comes in, never meeting me before, sees this and says this word, beautiful. So the fact that I was up till 2 a.m. this morning, as my colleague Matt said, I don't know if this is for me, the day and night, but the fuel for me to get through the night was knowing that I could help her to feel better about this transition, and that people would be able to walk away with a keepsake So that's what's in it for me, is knowing that this design didn't exist, but because I gave that extra effort and I was exhausted and I wanted to just go to sleep and say, forget it, I'm not doing it. Let me call them, it's done. But then I realized that, okay, there's probably hundreds of people that are going to feel better about this service because this happened. So.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. And finally, Rebecca.
Well, I work in education, so I'm really lucky that, and my dad was always telling us this, like, work for yourself, don't work for anybody else. So while I do work in education, I can appreciate that I'm not making someone else rich, that my job, my time, and my energy is about, helping the people that are helping kids. And so that's, a pretty great feeling going to work, knowing that in the end, you're actually helping people. And then, I got my little side gigs going on, so that's helpful. The challenging part, and I think you guys would probably agree, is the technology field changes every day. So, I've definitely put together, trainings, made sure everything is right. I'll practice them, or if I've put together a documentation, and then right when it's ready to go out the door, the tool has changed. And what I just did was, for nothing at that point. So that can be a bit frustrating, because it's, you're never caught up, I guess. It's, we're always in that place of having to learn more. But like I said, especially in my day job, it's really awesome knowing that in the end, we're helping people.
All right. Well, we are 3 minutes over, and we didn't get to every question, but we were pretty close. Thank you all so much for your time today, for sharing yourselves with us. And Sita, I'll turn it over to you to close things up.
Well, I'm just going to repeat what you said. Angela, thank you so much, everyone. I think this was a very dynamic and interesting and super valuable hour. And we thank you so much for sharing your professional knowledge with our job seekers and our youth. And so thanks so much. Have a wonderful evening. And we hope to see you again online or in LinkedIn. And if anybody has questions, go ahead and email either Angela or me, and we'll pass them on to our speakers. Thanks so much, everyone. Good night.
All right. Good night, everybody.